The grand hall of Silverpeak Castle had never seen such chaos. 1,000 women, 1,000 hopefuls, 1,000 hearts beating with ambition, desperation, and dreams of wearing a crown. They filled every corner of the massive stone chamber, daughters of alphas, heiresses to vast territories, warrior princesses with legendary bloodlines, beauties whose faces had launched wars and brokered peace treaties, all of them here for one reason, to win the heart of the White Lycan King. Welcome back, my beautiful family. Before we get started, kindly subscribe, like, share, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Tonight's story is about power, silence, and a love that defied every expectation. This is a tale of a king who could have anyone, and the omega no one saw coming. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's begin this epic journey. Isla Greywillow pressed herself against the cold stone wall of the servants' entrance, trying to make herself even smaller than she already was. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not in the grand hall. Not anywhere near the selection ceremony that would determine the future queen of the Lycan territories. But Lady Morgana, the noblewoman she served, had insisted Isla accompany her. Not as a participant, of course. The very idea was laughable. No, Isla was here to carry Lady Morgana's extra gowns, to powder her nose between presentations, to adjust her hair when it inevitably came loose from its elaborate styling. Isla was here to be invisible, which, after 23 years of being mute, she'd become quite good at. She'd been born without a voice. No injury, no trauma, no curse, just silence where sound should have been. Her parents, low-ranking wolves in a minor pack, had tried everything. Healers, seers, even dark magic practitioners who promised miracles for a price. Nothing worked. By the time Isla turned 13, they had given up. By 15, they'd sold her into service to pay off debts. By 20, they were dead, killed in a territory dispute Isla only learned about secondhand. She hadn't cried at their funeral, couldn't make a sound even if she'd wanted to, just stood silent while her former pack, muttered about the cursed mute girl who brought bad luck wherever she went. Now she served Lady Morgana, a vain alpha's daughter who treated Isla like a particularly useful piece of furniture, which was fine. Isla had learned long ago that being furniture was safer than being seen. "Attention!" The royal herald's voice boomed across the hall, cutting through the excited chatter of 1,000 women. His Majesty, Aldric Whitefang, White Lycan King of the Northern Territories, Protector of the Sacred Peaks, Lord of... The list of titles continued, but Isla stopped listening. She'd heard them before, whispered with reverence by the other servants, spoken with awe by visiting nobles, recited with fear by those who'd crossed him. Aldric Whitefang, the White Lycan King, the last of his kind. White Lycans were legend-made flesh, larger, stronger, faster than any normal werewolf. Their fur was pure white, their eyes glacial blue, and their power was absolute. They'd ruled the werewolf territories for millennia until a plague wiped out the entire bloodline, all except one. Aldric had been a child when the plague struck, barely 8 years old when he watched his parents, his siblings, his entire family die in agony while healers stood helpless. He'd survived through sheer force of will and something the elders called the old magic, a power that ran in White Lycan blood, dormant until death came knocking. Now, at 32, he ruled alone. No siblings, no cousins, no family at all. The last White Lycan in existence, carrying the weight of his entire bloodline's legacy on his shoulders, and he needed an heir. The massive oak doors at the far end of the hall swung open with a boom that made even the bravest warriors flinch. Aldric Whitefang entered, and every woman in the hall held her breath. He was magnificent. There was no other word for it. Tall, impossibly tall, standing head and shoulders above his own guards, who were already massive. Broad-shouldered, moving with a predator's grace that made grown alphas instinctively lower their eyes. His hair was white blonde, falling past his shoulders, and his eyes were that legendary glacial blue that seemed to see through flesh and bone straight into the soul. He wore black leather and silver armor, the royal crest of the White Lycans emblazoned across his chest, a wolf's head crowned with ice crystals. His face was all hard angles and sharp edges, beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful. Dangerous, lethal, absolutely in control. Isla felt her heart stutter in her chest. She'd seen him before, of course, from a distance. All servants had, but never this close, never in full ceremonial regalia, radiating power that made the very air in the hall feel heavier. "Ladies," Aldric's voice was deep, carrying easily across the massive space without him having to raise it. "You've come from every corner of my territories, Some of you have traveled for weeks. You bring with you impressive bloodlines, considerable talents, and no doubt your family's hopes for an advantageous alliance." He paused, his glacial eyes sweeping the crowd. Isla saw women preen under his gaze, standing taller, pushing forward, desperate to be noticed. "But I'm not looking for an alliance," Aldric continued, and something in his tone made the room go very still. "I'm not looking for the most beautiful face or the most impressive pedigree. I'm looking for my mate, my true mate, the one the moon goddess intended for me, and I will know her when I find her." Whispers erupted. This wasn't how royal selections worked. Kings chose based on strategy, on politics, on what would benefit their kingdom, not on something as unpredictable as the mate bond. But Aldric Whitefang wasn't a normal king, and White Lycans didn't follow normal rules. "The ceremony will proceed as follows," the royal herald announced, stepping forward with a scroll. "Each lady will be presented to His Majesty. You will state your name, your pack, and your lineage. His Majesty will assess whether the mate bond exists. Those who are not chosen will be escorted out with honor and gratitude for their participation." Simple, efficient, and utterly terrifying for 1,000 women who'd pinned their entire futures on this moment. The presentations began. One by one, the noblewomen approached the raised dais where Aldric stood. Each was more stunning than the last, warriors in gleaming armor, beauties in gowns that cost more than Isla would earn in a lifetime. Daughters of alphas who commanded thousands of wolves. And one by one, Aldric dismissed them. Not cruelly, just factually. A brief assessment, a slight shake of his head, and they were escorted away. Some left with dignity, others with barely concealed tears, a few with rage that made their wolves flash in their eyes. Hours passed. The pile of rejected noblewomen grew, and Aldric's expression became progressively more resigned, more tired, like a man going through the motions of a duty he knew would fail. Isla watched from her corner, forgotten. Lady Morgana had been presented an hour ago, had bowed so low her forehead touched the floor, had recited her lineage in a voice dripping with honey, had looked up at Aldric through her lashes in a way that had made every other woman in the hall jealous. Aldric had looked at her for exactly 3 seconds, said no, and moved on. Lady Morgana had returned to where Isla waited, her face a mask of humiliation and rage. "This is your fault," she'd hissed at Isla. "You and your cursed silence. You brought bad luck. You always do." Then she'd stormed out, leaving Isla alone in the corner with instructions to stay here and be useful somehow, assuming that's possible for a mute. So Isla stayed, because where else would she go? She had no home, no family, no pack that would claim her. She was furniture. Furniture didn't leave until it was told to. She watched as woman after woman was rejected, watched as Aldric's shoulders grew heavier with each dismissal, watched as hope slowly drained from the room, replaced by desperation tinged with fear. What if the White Lycan King never found his mate? What if the bloodline truly ended with him? What if the plague had taken not just his family, but his future? "Number 973, the herald called out, his voice hoarse from hours of presentations. A princess from the eastern shores approached, stunningly beautiful, daughter of an alpha who controlled half the coast. She bowed with perfect grace, her voice like music as she recited her lineage. Aldric looked at her, really looked, as if trying to will the mate bond into existence through sheer determination. Then he shook his head. "No, I'm sorry." The princess's face crumbled. She was escorted away, leaving only 27 women remaining. 27 chances left for the White Lycan King to find his mate. Isla felt an unexpected ache in her chest. She didn't know why, didn't know this king, had no claim to his story. But something about the loneliness in his eyes, the weight of expectation crushing him, the way he stood so isolated despite being surrounded by thousands, it resonated with something deep in her soul. She understood being alone in a crowd, understood being the last of your kind, even if her kind was just one mute omega in a world that valued voices. The presentations continued. 27 became 20, 20 became 10, 10 became 5, and then there was 1. The last woman approached, a warrior princess from the northern peaks, a distant cousin of Aldric's through some ancient bloodline. She was magnificent, battle-scarred and fierce, with a reputation that preceded her. If anyone could stand beside the White Lycan King as an equal, it was her. The hall held its breath. Aldric looked at her for a long moment. Isla saw something flicker in his eyes. Consideration? Hope? Then it died. No, he said, softer this time, almost apologetic. I'm sorry, the bond isn't there. The warrior princess nodded once, accepting defeat with more grace than most. She left without a word, her head high. And then there was no one. The grand hall stood empty except for Aldric on his dais, his guards, the herald, and the servants who'd been invisible this entire time. The White Lycan King stood alone, just as he'd stood alone his entire life. The last of his kind. The end of a bloodline that had ruled for thousands of years. Isla felt tears prick her eyes. She didn't know why she cared, didn't know why this stranger's pain felt like her own. But it did. Maybe because she understood what it felt like to be the end of something, to carry the weight of being the last, the only, the different. Your Majesty, the herald said quietly, I'm sorry. Perhaps in the southern territories there are others we could... No, Aldric's voice was hollow. If my mate were in the southern territories, I would have felt it, would have known. The mate bond doesn't work through distance, but there's always a pull, always a sense that someone, somewhere, is waiting. He shook his head slowly. There's nothing, no pull, no sense. She's not out there. Then what will you do? Rule alone, as I've always done. Aldric turned to leave, his shoulders carrying the weight of a bloodline's extinction. Dismiss the servants, close the hall, and prepare a statement for the territories. The White Lycan line will end with me. He descended from the dais, his footsteps echoing in the silent hall. His guards moved to follow him, the herald scrambled to record his commands, and everyone prepared to leave. And that's when it happened. Isla, trying to make herself even smaller as the king passed, accidentally knocked over the bag of Lady Morgana's belongings she'd been holding. Cosmetics, jewelry, and small trinkets scattered across the stone floor with a clatter that seemed impossibly loud in the silent hall. Every head turned. Isla's face burned with humiliation as she dropped to her knees, scrambling to gather the items before anyone could yell at her. She knew better than to draw attention, knew better than to make noise, even accidentally. Furniture didn't clatter, furniture didn't exist. She reached for a lipstick that had rolled toward the dais steps, her hands shaking, and found herself staring at a pair of black leather boots. Isla froze. Slowly, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it, she looked up. Aldric Whitefang stood 2 feet away, staring down at her with an expression she couldn't read. His glacial blue eyes were wide, his mouth slightly open, and his entire body had gone completely still, not the stillness of calm, but of shock, of someone who'd just been struck by lightning. You, he breathed. Isla's mind went blank. She opened her mouth instinctively, the way she always did when addressed directly, even though no sound would come. Just habit. The automatic response of someone trying to be normal even when they're not. Nothing came out, of course, just silence, the same silence that had defined her entire life. But Aldric wasn't looking at her mouth. He was staring at her eyes, at her face, at her with such intensity it made her want to crawl out of her own skin. You, he said again, and this time his voice cracked. It's you. Isla shook her head frantically. No, whatever he thought, he was wrong. She was nobody, nothing. A mute omega who carried bags and powdered noses and existed in corners where important people wouldn't trip over her. But Aldric dropped to one knee, bringing himself level with her, even though he still towered over her small frame. His hand reached out slowly, carefully, as if she were a wild animal that might bolt. His fingers touched her cheek, and the world exploded. Isla gasped, silent, always silent, but the shock of it ripped through her body like electricity. The mate bond, the thing she'd heard about but never believed she'd experienced, because who would want a mute omega as a mate? It snapped into place between them like a physical thing, a golden thread connecting her soul to his. She could feel him, his loneliness, his shock, his desperate hope, his wolf howling with recognition after 32 years of waiting, and underneath it all, a sense of coming home, of finding the missing piece she hadn't known was missing, of finally being seen. You're her, Aldric whispered, his glacial eyes shining with unshed tears. You're my mate, my true mate. I've searched for you for years, traveled every territory, presented myself to thousands of women, and you were here, right here, in my own castle. How? He stopped himself, seeming to realize that the woman kneeling before him hadn't said a single word. What's your name? He asked gently. Isla's throat worked. She opened her mouth, trying so hard to force sound, to give him this one thing, to not start their bond with another reminder of what she lacked. Nothing. Just silence. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Frustrated, humiliated, angry tears. Of course. Of course, the moon goddess would give the White Lycan King, the most powerful ruler in existence, a mate who couldn't even tell him her name. But Aldric didn't look disappointed. His expression softened into something that looked almost like understanding. His thumb gently wiped away one of her tears. "Can you not speak?" he asked quietly. Isla nodded, more tears falling. "Were you injured? Cursed?" She shook her head. "Born this way. Always like this. Defective from the start." "Can you write?" Isla hesitated, then nodded slowly. She'd taught herself to read and write over the years, picking it up from scraps of paper and patient servants who took pity on the mute girl. She wasn't fluent, but she could communicate. Barely. "Then we'll find a way," Aldric said simply, as if it were the easiest thing in the world. As if her silence didn't matter, didn't change anything, didn't make her less than what he deserved. He stood, pulling her gently to her feet. Then he did something that made every person in the hall gasp in shock. The White Lycan King knelt before her, fully knelt, one knee on the ground, his head bowed. "My mate," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent hall. "My true mate, chosen by the moon goddess herself. I, Aldric Whitefang, White Lycan King, ask for your acceptance of our bond. I offer you my protection, my loyalty, my heart, and my throne. Will you accept me as your mate?" Isla couldn't breathe. This wasn't how it was supposed to work. Kings didn't kneel, certainly not to mute Omega servants wearing threadbare clothes and carrying someone else's cosmetics bag. But the mate bond pulled at her heart, singing with recognition. And in Aldric's eyes, she saw the same loneliness she'd carried her entire life, the same isolation, the same desperate hope that maybe, finally, someone would see past the exterior to the person underneath. She nodded. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Aldric's face transformed. The hardness melted away, replaced by a smile so genuine and relieved it made him look years younger. He stood, and before Isla could react, he swept her into his arms, bridal style, as if she weighed nothing, and turned to face the shocked witnesses. "Behold your queen," he declared, his voice ringing with authority and joy. "My true mate, chosen by the moon goddess, and anyone who objects will answer to me personally." No one objected. No one would dare. But as Aldric carried Isla out of the grand hall, past servants and guards who scrambled to bow, past the herald who was frantically scribbling notes about this unprecedented turn of events, Isla caught a glimpse of Lady Morgana in a side corridor. Her former mistress's face was twisted with rage and disbelief, and in that moment Isla knew this wasn't the end of her struggles, it was just the beginning. The royal chambers of Silverpeak Castle were unlike anything Isla had ever seen. Massive tapestries depicting White Lycan history lined the walls. A fireplace large enough to stand in dominated one side of the room. Thick furs covered a bed that could easily fit 10 people. Windows of real glass, not the cheap horn windows she was used to, overlooked the mountain ranges that stretched endlessly into the distance. This was where kings lived, where power resided, where Isla absolutely did not belong. "You're trembling," Aldric observed quietly. He'd set her down gently once they entered his chambers, then immediately taken 3 steps back, giving her space. "Are you cold? Afraid? Both?" Isla wrapped her arms around herself, not sure how to answer. She was terrified, yes, but also confused, overwhelmed, and desperately trying to understand how her entire life had changed in the span of 5 minutes. Aldric moved to a desk near the window and returned with parchment and ink. He set them on a small table, pulled out a chair, and gestured for her to sit. "Write to me," he said gently. "Tell me your name. Tell me what you need. Tell me anything you want. I know this must be overwhelming. I know I'm a stranger. But we have time. We have all the time in the world." Isla sank into the chair, picked up the quill with shaking hands, and wrote in careful, simple letters. "My name is Isla Greywillow. I was a servant to Lady Morgana Blackwater. I don't understand why the moon goddess chose me. I'm nobody. I can't even speak." She pushed the parchment toward him, unable to meet his eyes. Aldric read it slowly, then knelt beside her chair so he could look up at her face. "Isla," he said, testing her name on his tongue. "Isla Greywillow. That's beautiful." She shook her head. Nothing about her was beautiful. "Yes," Aldric insisted gently. "It is. And you're not nobody, Isla. You're my mate, the one I've been searching for. The one my wolf recognized instantly, even though we'd never met. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes. Isla grabbed the parchment again, writing quickly. But I can't speak. How can I be a queen if I can't give speeches or negotiate with other alphas or even tell you what I need without writing it down first? The same way I rule, despite the fact that I'm the last of my kind and constantly fighting to prove I'm not weak because of my isolation, Aldric said. We adapt. We find ways. And Isla, he took her hand carefully, as if she were made of glass. Silence doesn't mean weakness. Some of the strongest people I know are those who've learned to communicate without words. Your eyes say more than most people's speeches ever could. Tears pricked at Isla's eyes again. No one had ever said anything like that to her. No one had ever suggested her silence could be anything other than a curse. There's something else you should know, Aldric continued. The mate bond. It's more than just recognition. As we grow closer, as we accept it fully, we'll develop a mental connection, mind-to-mind communication. It's a White Lycan trait that extends to our mates. You'll be able to speak to me, Isla, in your own voice, through our bond. Isla's head snapped up, her eyes wide. Was that possible? Could she actually have a voice, even if only he could hear it? It takes time, Aldric warned, and it requires trust. The bond has to be fully accepted on both sides, fully consummated. But yes, eventually, you'll speak to me. I'll hear your voice, your thoughts, and you'll hear mine. He smiled slightly. Fair warning, my thoughts are often a disaster. You might regret the ability. Despite everything, Isla felt her lips twitch. Was the fearsome White Lycan King making a joke? A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Aldric stood, his expression hardening back into that mask of authority. Enter. The royal steward, an elderly wolf named Garrick, who Isla had seen from a distance but never spoken to, entered with a bow. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but word has spread throughout the castle. The nobles are concerned. They wish to understand how a servant, he hesitated, clearly trying to find diplomatic words, came to be chosen as your mate when 1,000 noblewomen were rejected. Tell the nobles that the moon goddess's choices are not subject to their approval, Aldric said coldly, and that anyone who questions my mate's worthiness will be questioning me directly. Of course, your Majesty. But perhaps a formal announcement? A ceremony to present the future queen? It would help ease the transition and establish her position beyond question. Aldric looked at Isla, his expression softening. What do you think? Are you ready to face the court? Or would you prefer more time? Isla picked up the quill. Will waiting make it easier, or just give them more time to build resentment? Aldric read it and smiled grimly. You're already thinking like a queen. You're right. We do it now, on our terms, before they can organize opposition. He turned back to Garrick. Gather the court in 1 hour. Every alpha currently in the castle, every noble family, will make the formal announcement then. And what should I tell them about? About the future queen's condition? Tell them nothing, Aldric said sharply. They'll see for themselves, and they'll learn that silence doesn't mean weakness, lack of intelligence, or anything else their small minds might assume. Now go. We have preparations to make. After Garrick left, Aldric turned to Isla with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry. I know you just found out about all this. I know you're overwhelmed, but he's right. If we don't establish your position immediately, there will be challenges. Attempts to undermine you, possibly even threats to your safety. Isla's eyes widened. Threats? I won't let anyone hurt you, Aldric said immediately, reading her expression. But you need to understand, this castle is full of alphas who wanted to be in your position, who wanted to be chosen, who expected one of them to become queen. Finding out a servant was chosen instead, he sighed. There will be resentment, jealousy, maybe even attempts to prove you're unworthy, so I'll reject the bond and choose someone else. Isla wrote, Can you? Reject the mate bond? Theoretically, yes. But it would destroy both of us. The mate bond isn't something you ignore or set aside. It's woven into our souls. Rejecting it would be like ripping out part of ourselves. His glacial eyes locked onto hers. And I have no intention of rejecting you, Isla. None. You're mine, and I'm yours, and no amount of political pressure will change that. The intensity in his gaze made Isla's breath catch. This man, this king, this legend was hers. The thought was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. A group of female servants arrived shortly after, sent to help Isla prepare for the announcement. They were professional, efficient, and clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Isla could see it in the way they avoided her eyes, in the stiffness of their movements. They dressed her in a gown of deep blue silk, simple compared to what the noblewoman wore, but finer than anything Isla had ever touched. They braided her dark hair with silver threads. They gave her simple jewelry, nothing ostentatious, but enough to mark her new status. When they finished, one of the older servants, a woman named Helena who'd always been kind to Isla in passing, spoke quietly. "You look beautiful, milady, truly." Isla smiled her thanks, wishing she could express how much that small kindness meant. "For what it's worth," Helena continued, even quieter, "I've served in this castle for 40 years. I've seen kings come and go. I've never seen His Majesty look at anyone the way he looked at you in that hall, like you were the answer to every prayer he'd never spoken out loud." Isla's eyes burned with tears again. She grabbed Helena's hand and squeezed it gratefully. When Aldric saw her, his reaction made all the discomfort worth it. His eyes widened, his breath caught, and for a moment, the fearsome White Lycan King looked like a man struck speechless by beauty. "Isla," he breathed. Then, seeming to catch himself, he approached and offered his arm formally. "My queen, are you ready?" Isla took his arm, feeling the strength in it, the warmth despite his ice-blue eyes. She nodded. Together, they walked toward the throne room where the court waited to judge whether a mute Omega servant was worthy of standing beside a king. The throne room was packed. Every alpha currently residing in Silverpeak Castle had assembled, a sea of powerful wolves whose combined authority could crush armies, noble families from across the territories, warriors, merchants, diplomats, all of them there to witness the unprecedented announcement, and all of them staring at Isla with expressions ranging from confusion to disgust to barely veiled hostility. Isla's steps faltered. This was madness. These people would eat her alive. She was nobody, nothing, a mute servant who couldn't even defend herself verbally if they challenged her. Aldric felt her hesitation. He leaned down, his lips near her ear, and whispered, "You are stronger than you know. I feel it through the bond, and I'm right here. I won't let anyone hurt you." They continued forward, climbing the steps to the dual thrones that had sat empty for years. Aldric guided Isla to the smaller throne, though calling it smaller was misleading, since it was still larger and more ornate than anything she'd ever sat on, and remained standing beside her, his hand on her shoulder. The gesture was clear. "She's mine. Touch her and die." "Lords and ladies of the realm," Aldric's voice rang out, commanding instant silence. "You were summoned to witness the selection ceremony. 1,000 women presented themselves. 1,000 were found wanting, not because they lacked beauty or breeding or strength, but because the mate bond is not something we choose. It chooses us." He paused, letting that sink in. "The moon goddess has chosen my mate. She is Isla Greywillow, and before any of you voice your objections, and I can see them forming on your faces, understand this. I will not reject her. I will not set her aside for political convenience. The mate bond is sacred. It is unbreakable, and anyone who attempts to undermine my mate will be considered an enemy of the throne." A tall alpha near the front, Lord Venner, one of the most powerful territorial rulers, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, with respect, we must consider the practicalities. A queen must fulfill certain duties, diplomacy, speeches, negotiations with other pacts. How can a mute Omega possibly—" "Lord Venner," Aldric interrupted, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Are you questioning the moon goddess's wisdom?" "I'm questioning the practicality, because it sounds like you're suggesting I know better than the divine force that has guided our kind for millennia, that I should reject the mate the goddess herself chose for me because you find her lacking." Aldric's eyes flashed ice blue. "Should I also question why the goddess made me the last White Lycan? Why she allowed my entire family to die? Why she gave me power but no one to share it with for 32 years? Or do we only question her wisdom when it's inconvenient?" The room went deadly silent. "Isla is my mate," Aldric continued, each word sharp as a blade. "She is your future queen, and you will treat her with the respect that position demands. Are we clear?" Reluctant nods, uncomfortable shifting. But no one dared argue further. Then Lady Morgana stepped forward from the crowd, her face a mask of false concern. "Your Majesty, perhaps the issue isn't whether the girl is your mate, but whether she's ready for such a position. She's been a servant her entire life. She has no training in court politics, no education in governance, no understanding of what it means to be a queen, perhaps a period of preparation." "Lady Morgana," Aldric said coldly, "Isla served you, did she not?" Morgana's eyes widened slightly, realizing her mistake. "Yes, Your Majesty." "And during that service, was she incompetent, Did she fail to follow instructions? Did she cause problems? No, but so she can learn. She can follow direction. She can adapt to new situations and fulfill responsibilities given to her. That sounds exactly like the qualities needed in a queen. Aldric's smile was sharp. Unless you're suggesting that your own judgment in keeping a worthless servant in your employ for years was flawed? Morgana's face flushed. Of course not, Your Majesty. I only meant— I know what you meant, and your concern is noted and dismissed. Isla will have tutors. She'll have training. She'll have time to grow into her role, just as I had time to grow into mine. His hand tightened on Isla's shoulder. And she'll have me. My support, my protection, my guidance. More than that, she has the mate bond, which means she has access to my knowledge, my experience, everything I've learned in 32 years of ruling. Through our connection, she'll understand things that would take others years to grasp. He addressed the room at large. My mate may be silent, but that doesn't make her weak, doesn't make her stupid, doesn't make her anything less than exactly what the moon goddess intended, and I expect all of you to remember that. The room remained quiet, but Isla could feel the undercurrent of resentment. These wolves weren't convinced. They were simply too afraid of Aldric to argue further. It wasn't acceptance, it was compliance, and the difference would matter. As the formal announcement concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Isla saw the looks, the sneers quickly hidden, the whispers behind raised hands, the calculation in ambitious eyes. Aldric had been right. There would be challenges, attempts to prove her unworthy, maybe even threats, and Isla had no idea how she was supposed to fight them when she couldn't even speak in her own defense. The first challenge came 3 days later. Isla was in the Queen's study, a room she still couldn't believe was hers, attempting to read through documents about territorial treaties. Her tutors had started immediately, reading comprehension, writing practice, history of the realm, current political situations. It was overwhelming, but Isla threw herself into it with desperate determination. She had to prove she could do this, had to prove the moon goddess hadn't made a mistake. A knock at the door interrupted her concentration. Before Isla could signal entry, 3 noblewomen swept in without invitation. Ladies Morgana, Celeste, and Ravenna. All from powerful alpha families. All who'd been presented at the selection ceremony and rejected. We need to speak with you, Morgana announced, as if she were still Isla's mistress and not addressing the future queen. Isla set down her quill slowly, her heart hammering. Aldric had assigned her guards, but they stood outside the study, not within. She was alone with 3 wolves who clearly wanted her gone. We've been discussing your situation, Celeste said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, and we want to help, truly. Isla raised an eyebrow skeptically. You must understand how this looks, Ravenna continued. A servant, a mute servant, suddenly elevated to queen. The other packs are already whispering, questioning His Majesty's judgment, suggesting the stress of being the last White Lycan has affected his mind. Isla's hands clenched into fists. They were trying to make her doubt, trying to make her believe she was harming Aldric by accepting the bond. We think it would be best for everyone, Morgana said, moving closer. If you rejected the mate bond, voluntarily, before the formal coronation, we could frame it as you realizing you weren't ready for such responsibility. His Majesty would be free to choose someone more suitable, someone who could actually help him rule instead of being a burden he has to protect and explain. Isla grabbed her parchment and wrote quickly, The mate bond cannot be rejected without destroying both parties. You know this. That's what they say, Ravenna said dismissively. But there are ways. Dark magic, ancient rituals. We know practitioners who could sever the bond cleanly, leaving His Majesty free to find a true queen. You'd be compensated, of course, Celeste added. Given lands, titles, wealth, you'd live comfortably for the rest of your life. Just somewhere else, away from the throne you're not equipped to sit upon. Isla stared at them, understanding flooding through her. This wasn't about what was best for Aldric or the kingdom. This was about their wounded pride, about powerful women who couldn't accept that a mute servant had won what they'd lost. She wrote, Leave, now. Don't be foolish, Morgana snapped. We're trying to help you. Do you really think you can survive here? Court politics will eat you alive. You can't defend yourself verbally, can't form alliances, can't even call for help if someone attacks you. You're prey in a den of predators. Isla stood, drawing herself up to her full height, which was considerably shorter than any of them, but she refused to be intimidated. She wrote quickly, I am the White Lycan King's mate. The moon goddess chose me, and I will not reject that bond because you're jealous. She rang the bell that would summon her guards. then wrote one more thing. Leave now, or I'll have you removed, and I'll tell Aldric about this conversation. The three women exchanged glances. Morgana's face twisted with rage. You'll regret this. We were offering you an easy way out. Now we'll have to do this the hard way. They swept out just as the guards entered. Isla sank back into her chair, her hands shaking. Was Morgana right? Would court politics destroy her? Was she being selfish, clinging to a bond with a man who deserved better? Isla? She jumped. Aldric stood in the doorway, concern etched on his face. The bond must have carried her distress to him. He crossed the room quickly, kneeling beside her chair. What happened? I felt your fear through the bond. Are you hurt? Isla shook her head, then wrote, Ladies Morgana, Celeste, and Ravenna were here. They want me to reject the mate bond. Said they know practitioners who could sever it with dark magic. Said I'm harming you by staying. Aldric's expression went from concern to fury. So fast it was like watching a storm roll in. His eyes flashed ice blue, his wolf pushing at the surface. They threatened you. In your own study. In my castle. He stood, his whole body radiating lethal intent. Where are they now? Isla grabbed his hand, pulling him back. She wrote quickly. Don't. That's what they want. To prove I'm a liability. That you have to constantly protect me. That I caused problems. You're not the problem. They are. But Aldric forced himself to take a breath, to push his wolf back down. You're right. If I kill them, and make no mistake, that's what would happen if I confront them right now. It would look like you can't handle opposition. Like you need me to fight your battles. He knelt again, taking both her hands. But Isla, you can't let them intimidate you. If they smell weakness, they'll circle like sharks. You have to show them you're strong enough to hold your position. Isla wrote, How? I can't argue with them, can't defend myself verbally, can't even insult them back. You don't need words to be intimidating, Aldric said seriously. Some of the strongest wolves I know barely speak. They communicate through presence, through confidence, through making it clear that crossing them would be a fatal mistake. He squeezed her hands. You're my mate. You carry my authority. And soon, when our bond deepens, you'll have access to my power. They don't know that yet. Use their ignorance against them. But what if they're right? Isla wrote, tears pricking her eyes. What if I am a burden? What if you'd be better off with someone who could actually help you rule? Stop. Aldric's voice was firm. The mate bond doesn't make mistakes, Isla. The moon goddess chose you specifically, not because you're perfect, but because you're perfect for me. Do you know what I felt the moment our eyes met? For the first time in 32 years, I wasn't alone. I'd been surrounded by people my entire reign, advisors, guards, servants, nobles, but I was always alone, the last of my kind, the one no one could truly understand. He touched her face gently, and then I saw you, silent, observing from the shadows, invisible to everyone else, and my wolf recognized you instantly, because you understand what it's like to be isolated, even in a crowd, to carry something that makes you different, to be the only one of your kind. Tears spilled down Isla's cheeks. You're not a burden, Aldric said quietly. You're the only person in this entire castle who sees me as more than a king or a weapon or the last White Lycan. You see me as just me. And I need that more than I need someone who can give pretty speeches or play political games. Isla wrote through her tears. I'm scared. What if I fail you? Then we fail together. But I don't think you will. I think you're stronger than you realize. And I think those three ladies are about to learn that underestimating the mute Omega was the worst mistake of their lives. Despite her fear, Isla felt a smile tug at her lips. What do? We show them that my mate is not someone to be trifled with. Aldric's smile was sharp, starting with making an example that everyone will remember. The council meeting 3 days later was attended by every major alpha in the castle, the first formal gathering since Isla had been announced as queen-to-be. She sat beside Aldric at the head of the massive stone table, acutely aware of every eye on her. Lord Vanor cleared his throat. Your Majesty, we need to discuss the situation with the southern border. Rogue packs have been attacking settlements. We need to respond with force. Agreed, Aldric said. Prepare 3 battalions. Perhaps we should consult with the queen-to-be, Lady Morgana interrupted smoothly. After all, she'll be making these decisions alongside you. Surely she has opinions on military strategy. The room went silent. Every alpha turned to look at Isla, challenge in their eyes. This was a test. A trap. If she stayed silent, they'd say she was useless. If she tried to answer, she'd expose her lack of knowledge. Isla's heart pounded. Then she felt it, a warmth through the mate bond, Aldric's presence, his support, his confidence in her. She picked up her quill and wrote carefully, "I know nothing of military strategy. That's why His Majesty has generals and advisors. But I know what it's like to be defenseless while predators circle. I know the fear of those settlers. Whatever response we choose should prioritize protecting the vulnerable, not just punishing the rogues." She pushed the parchment to the center of the table. Lord Venor read it, his eyebrows rising. A compassionate approach, unusual. "But not wrong," Aldric said firmly. "We've been so focused on punishment that we forgot the point is protection. Isla's right. We station permanent guards at vulnerable settlements. We create safe zones. We give the rogues less to attack in the first place." He looked at Isla with something like pride. "My mate sees what we missed because we were too busy thinking like warriors instead of protectors." The alphas exchanged glances. Grudging respect flickered in some eyes. In others, increased resentment. Lady Celeste spoke up. "Of course, written responses are fine for council meetings, but what about diplomatic situations? Meeting with other alphas? Negotiating treaties? Surely the Queen must be able to speak for herself." "Why?" Aldric asked bluntly. "I've met plenty of alphas who talk constantly and say nothing of value. Isla's written words carry more weight than most people's speeches. Besides," he smiled slightly, "silence can be incredibly intimidating. Have you ever tried to negotiate with someone who just stares at you without responding? It's unnerving. Isla's silence is a weapon she doesn't even realize she's wielding." "But tradition?" Ravenna started. "Tradition also said White Lycans would rule forever," Aldric interrupted coldly. "Then plague killed all of them but me. Tradition doesn't mean much when the moon goddess decides to change the rules. My mate is exactly what this kingdom needs. You'll all come to see that, or you'll leave. Your choice." The meeting continued, but the challenge had been met. Isla had participated, had offered valuable insight, had shown she wasn't just decoration sitting beside the throne. It was a small victory, but it was a start. After the meeting, as Isla was returning to her chambers, she found her path blocked by Lord Venor. "My lady," he said, his tone respectful but his eyes calculating. "A word?" Isla nodded slowly, gesturing to her guard to stay close. "I wanted to apologize," Venor said, "for questioning your position. I see now that you bring a perspective we need. Someone who understands vulnerability because she's lived it." Isla wrote, "Thank you. However," Venor continued, "you should know that not everyone will be so accepting. There are factions forming. Wolves who believe His Majesty's judgment is compromised by the mate bond, who think he should reject you for the good of the kingdom." Isla's blood ran cold. She wrote, "Are you one of them?" "No," Venor said, and she believed him. "I'm practical. His Majesty is the strongest ruler we've had in generations. Whatever makes him happy makes him effective, and you clearly make him happy. But others see weakness, opportunity. Be careful, my lady. Not everyone who smiles at you wishes you well." He bowed and left, leaving Isla with a knot of dread in her stomach. That night, Aldric found her in their shared chambers. She'd finally moved from the guest quarters, staring out the window at the mountains. "You're troubled," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. The mate bond had grown stronger over the past week. He could feel her emotions more clearly now, and she could sense his presence even when they were apart. Isla wrote on parchment she kept nearby. "Lord Venor warned me. Said there are factions forming against me, against us." "I know," Aldric said quietly. "My spies have been reporting the same. Lady Morgana is at the center of it. She's been
meeting with other alphas, building support for a formal challenge to the mate bond. Can they do that? Technically, yes. If enough alphas sign a petition claiming the king is unfit due to poor judgment, they can call for a council of elders to review my decisions. It's meant as a check on tyrants, but it's never actually been used successfully."
"But they're going to try?" "Probably. Which means we need to be ready." Aldric turned her to face him. "There's a way to end this, Isla. To make your position unassailable. We complete the mate bond, fully. Once the bond is consummated, once we're bonded in every way, you'll have access to my power. You'll be able to shift into a form enhanced by White Lycan magic, and most importantly, you'll be able to speak to me mind to mind. Every alpha will feel the change in you, will recognize you as a true queen, not just someone I've elevated. Isla's heart raced. He was talking about being together, fully, as mates. I'm not pressuring you, Aldric said quickly. We can wait as long as you need. I just want you to know it's an option, a way to shut down the opposition permanently. Isla wrote, "What if I'm not ready? What if I mess it up?" Aldric's expression softened. Isla, there's no messing up intimacy between mates. The bond guides us, makes everything natural, and we'll go slowly as you need. He cupped her face. But there's something else you should consider. Once the bond is complete, once you can speak to me through our connection, you'll have a voice again. Not the way you had before you were born, but a voice nonetheless. You'll be able to tell me everything. Your thoughts, your fears, your needs, your feelings. Without writing, without barriers, just us, connected in a way no one can interfere with. Tears welled in Isla's eyes. A voice. After 23 years of silence, she could have a voice again. She wrote, "I'm scared, but I trust you, and I want to be strong enough to stand beside you without constantly needing protection." "You're already strong enough," Aldric said. "But if this will help you see what I already know, then we'll do it, together, on your timeline, when you're ready." Isla took a deep breath, then wrote, "I'm ready now, before they can challenge us, before they can tear apart what the moon goddess built. I want to be your mate, fully, in every way." Aldric's eyes darkened with desire and something deeper, love, fierce and protective. "Are you sure?" Isla nodded, her heart pounding, but her resolve firm. She was done being afraid, done letting others dictate her worth. The moon goddess had chosen her for a reason. It was time to claim that destiny, fully. "Then come here," Aldric said gently, leading her toward their bed, "and let me show you what it means to be truly seen, truly heard, truly cherished." The next morning, everything was different. Isla woke wrapped in Aldric's arms, feeling the mate bond thrumming between them like a living thing. It was complete now, fully formed, unbreakable, and she could hear him. "Good morning, my queen," Aldric's voice echoed in her mind, warm and intimate in a way that made her gasp. For a moment, Isla couldn't respond. She had a voice. After 23 years of silence, she could speak, not out loud, that was still impossible, but through the bond, directly into Aldric's mind. "Can you hear me?" she thought tentatively. "I hear you," Aldric responded, his actual voice thick with emotion. "Your voice is beautiful, Isla. Everything I imagined and more." Tears streamed down her face. "I can talk to you. I can actually talk to you. You can," he confirmed, pulling her closer, "and you always will. This connection can never be severed, never be broken. You're mine, and I'm yours, and nothing anyone does can change that." They lay together for a while, just talking mind to mind, Isla reveling in the ability to express herself without barriers. Aldric told her about his childhood, his family, the loneliness of being the last White Lycan. Isla told him about growing up mute, being sold into service, the years of being invisible. They shared everything, and through the bond, they understood each other completely. "There's something else," Aldric said eventually. "Try to shift." "I can't shift," Isla thought automatically. "I'm Omega. Omegas can shift, but it's weak. I've never been strong enough." "Try," Aldric insisted. "The White Lycan magic changes things. You're connected to my bloodline now. Call your wolf. She's stronger than you think." Isla closed her eyes, reaching for the wolf she'd always felt sleeping inside her, the wolf that had never been strong enough to emerge fully. Except now it wasn't weak. Now it was infused with something ancient and powerful, White Lycan magic flowing through the mate bond, transforming her from the inside out. She shifted. The transformation was smooth, powerful, nothing like the painful struggle she'd experienced in her few past attempts. When Isla opened her eyes, she was looking at the world from a wolf's perspective. But not just any wolf. She ran to the mirror Aldric kept in his chambers and stared at her reflection in shock. Her wolf was silver gray, larger than any Omega had a right to be. But that wasn't what made her gasp. It was her eyes, glacial blue, the exact same shade as Aldric's, the mark of White Lycan magic. "You're magnificent," Aldric breathed, having shifted beside her. His massive white wolf dwarfed hers, but they complemented each other perfectly. "My mate, my queen, everything the moon goddess promised." Isla shifted back, her heart racing. "What does this mean?
It means you're not just my mate. You're my equal. You carry my magic now. The court can't deny you, can't claim you're weak, can't suggest you're unworthy. Aldric shifted back as well, grinning fiercely. You're the first Omega in history to carry White Lycan traits. That makes you unique, powerful, absolutely unmistakable as the future queen. A knock at the door interrupted them. "Enter," Aldric called. Garrick, the royal steward, entered and immediately froze, staring at Isla. "Your Majesty, Forgive me, but Lady Isla's eyes have changed," Aldric confirmed, pulling Isla against his side proudly. "The mate bond is complete. My magic now flows through her, as does my authority. Anyone who questions her position will be questioning the moon goddess's wisdom and my power simultaneously." Garrick's eyes widened in understanding. The court needs to see this. "Precisely. Call an emergency session. Every alpha, every noble family. We're going to make an announcement that will end all challenges to my mate's position." 2 hours later, Isla stood beside Aldric in the throne room once again, facing a court that had gathered in confusion and anticipation. This time, she wasn't afraid. She could feel Aldric's presence in her mind, his support, his fierce pride in her, and she could feel her own wolf, strong and powerful, carrying magic that made even the strongest alphas instinctively straighten. "Lords and ladies," Aldric announced, his voice carrying easily, "you questioned whether my mate was worthy of standing beside me, whether a mute Omega could truly be queen. Today, I answer those questions definitively." He gestured to Isla. "Look at her eyes. See the change. My mate now carries White Lycan magic. She is bonded to me in every way. Body, mind, soul, and power. She can shift into a form enhanced by my bloodline's ancient magic. And most importantly," his smile was sharp, "she can communicate with me directly, mind to mind. A connection that allows her to share knowledge, strategies, and decisions instantly. Something none of you can do." Gasps rippled through the crowd. White Lycan magic hadn't been passed to a mate in over 500 years. No one alive had ever seen it happen. Lady Morgana looked like she'd been struck. But that's impossible. Omega wolves can't carry alpha magic, let alone. "Are you questioning what's clearly visible before your eyes?" Aldric interrupted coldly. "Or are you simply upset that the moon goddess proved all of your doubts wrong?" Silence. "My mate is not just an Omega anymore," Aldric continued. "She's a White Lycan mate, the first in half a millennium. That makes her unique in all the territories, more than qualified to stand beside me. And anyone who continues to question her position will be questioning ancient magic itself." He moved down from the dais, pulling Isla with him, and addressed the court directly. "I know some of you have been meeting, plotting, discussing ways to undermine my mate or challenge the bond. Let me make this absolutely clear. Those actions end now, today, or you will be considered enemies of the throne and dealt with accordingly." His ice blue eyes swept the crowd, landing on Morgana, Celeste, and Ravenna. "The three of you in particular. You threatened my mate in her own study, suggested she reject our bond. Implied you had access to dark magic practitioners who could sever what the moon goddess created." The three women went pale. "Those were acts of treason," Aldric said quietly. "The punishment for which is death." Isla's hand tightened on his arm. "Aldric, wait. They threatened you," he responded through their bond. "They deserve—" "I know. But killing them makes me look weak. Like I can't handle opposition. Like I need you to eliminate my enemies." Isla took a breath, then continued. "Let me handle this. Please." Aldric studied her for a long moment, then nodded slightly. Out loud he said, "However, my mate has requested mercy, and I've learned that her judgment is often wiser than my immediate instincts." He stepped back, gesturing for Isla to come forward. Every eye turned to her. Isla felt her heart hammering, but she drew on the strength flowing through the mate bond, drew on the White Lycan magic now running through her veins, drew on the knowledge that Aldric was right there, supporting her, believing in her. She couldn't speak out loud, but she could communicate. Isla shifted. The transformation rippled through the throne room like a shockwave. Her silver gray wolf emerged, larger and more powerful than any Omega should be. And when she opened her eyes, glacial blue met the stunned gazes of 1,000 wolves. The entire court felt it, the surge of White Lycan magic, the undeniable authority, the proof that she wasn't just Aldric's mate, but something more, something unprecedented. Isla shifted back, standing before the court in a simple gown, her blue eyes glowing softly with power. Then she did something she'd never been able to do before.
She projected her thoughts, not just to Aldric, but to every wolf in the room through the mate bond's magic that now flowed through her. "You doubted me," her voice echoed in everyone's minds simultaneously, making several alphas stumble in shock. "You saw a mute omega and assumed weakness, assumed unworthiness, assumed the moon goddess made a mistake." She looked at Morgana, Celeste, and Ravenna specifically. "You three tried to manipulate me into rejecting my mate, into believing I was a burden, into thinking dark magic could sever what the divine created." Her voice hardened. "But I am not weak. I never was. My silence was never emptiness. It was patience, observation, understanding. While all of you were talking, I was learning, watching, seeing the truth beneath your words." She addressed the full court again. "I am the White Lycan King's true mate, chosen by the moon goddess, enhanced by ancient magic, and I will stand beside him as his equal, his partner, his queen. Anyone who tries to undermine that position will answer not just to him, but to me." The projection ended. Isla swayed slightly. Using magic like that was exhausting when she was so new to it, but Aldric was there instantly, steadying her. The throne room was utterly silent. Then, one by one, the alphas knelt, not out of fear, out of recognition. The magic had proven what words couldn't, that Isla was exactly what Aldric claimed, a true queen, blessed by the moon goddess, carrying power that commanded respect. Even Lord Venner, who'd questioned her from the start, knelt with his head bowed. "My queen," he said clearly. "I was wrong. Forgive my doubt." Others echoed him, a wave of submission and acceptance that washed through the court. Only Morgana, Celeste, and Ravenna remained standing, their faces twisted with rage and humiliation. "What would you have me do with them?" Aldric asked through their bond. "Execution? Exile?" Isla considered. These women had tried to destroy her, had threatened her, had plotted against her bond with Aldric. But killing them would make her no better than they were. Strip them of their titles, Isla decided. Send them back to their families in disgrace. Let them live with the knowledge that they tried to undermine a queen chosen by the moon goddess herself and failed. "That's a harsher punishment than death." Aldric smiled, pride flowing through their connection. Out loud he declared, "Ladies Morgana, Celeste, and Ravenna, you are hereby stripped of your titles and lands within my territories. You will return to your families, where your fathers will decide your fates. But you will never again set foot in Silverpeak Castle, never again have the ear of this court, and never again will you threaten what the moon goddess has ordained." Guards moved forward to escort them out. Morgana tried to protest, but one look from Isla, those glacial blue eyes glowing with ancient power, silenced her. As the three women were led away, the court erupted in declarations of loyalty. Alphas swearing their support, nobles pledging their allegiance, everyone suddenly eager to prove they'd always believed in the White Lycan King's mate. Isla let it wash over her, exhausted but triumphant. She'd done it. She'd faced her enemies and won, not through violence but through strength, through the proof that the moon goddess's choice was right. "You were incredible," Aldric said through their bond, pulling her close. "Absolutely incredible. I had good support," Isla responded, leaning into him. "We make a good team. The best." The formal coronation took place 1 month later. In that time, Isla had proven herself repeatedly. She'd learned to project her thoughts to larger groups, communicating in council meetings and negotiations without speaking aloud. She'd used her White Lycan enhanced senses to detect lies and hidden motives that others missed. She'd implemented policies protecting vulnerable wolves, especially omegas like she'd been, that were already changing lives across the territories. And she'd stood beside Aldric not as his shadow, but as his equal partner. The day of the coronation, Isla wore a gown of silver and white, the colors of the White Lycans. Her dark hair was adorned with a crown of ice crystals that wouldn't melt, created by ancient magic. And her eyes, those glacial blue eyes that marked her as something unprecedented, caught the light and gleamed. She looked like a queen. "Nervous?" Aldric asked through their bond as they prepared to enter the great hall. "Terrified," Isla admitted. "What if I mess up the ceremony? What if I—" "You won't," Aldric interrupted gently. "And even if you did, it wouldn't matter. You're already my queen, already my mate, already everything I need. The ceremony is just making it official for everyone else. You always know what to say. That's because I can hear your thoughts. Gives me an unfair advantage." She could feel his amusement through the bond. They entered the hall together, and the assembled crowd, larger than even the selection ceremony, rose to their feet. Elder Tiberius, the oldest and most respected wolf in the territories, stood at the altar. He'd been brought out of retirement specifically for this, because a White Lycan coronation hadn't happened in over 500 years, and he was the only one alive who remembered the old rituals. "We gather today," Tiberius announced, his voice surprisingly strong for his age, to witness something that was thought impossible. The coronation of a White Lycan queen, not born to the bloodline, but chosen by it, blessed by the moon goddess herself, carrying magic that has been lost for half a millennium. He gestured to Isla and Aldric. "Come forward." They ascended the steps together. Tiberius had them kneel side by side, then began the ancient words. "Aldric Whitefang, White Lycan King, you have found your mate. Do you swear to cherish her, protect her, and rule beside her as your equal?" "I swear," Aldric said clearly. "Isla Greywillow, chosen mate of the White Lycan King, you have accepted this bond. Do you swear to stand beside him, support him, and share the burden of rule as his partner?" Isla couldn't speak aloud, but she projected her response to everyone present. "I swear." The crowd gasped at hearing her voice, mental but clear and strong, directly in their minds. Then by the power of the moon goddess, by the ancient laws of the White Lycans, and by the witness of this court, I declare you king and queen of the northern territories. Tiberius placed a crown on Isla's head, smaller than Aldric's but equally ornate, carved from enchanted ice that would never melt. May your reign be long, your bond unbreakable, and your love eternal. Aldric turned to Isla, his eyes shining with emotion. Out loud he said, "My queen, my mate, my everything." "My king," Isla responded through their bond, "my mate, my home." They kissed, and power exploded through the hall, silver blue light that made every wolf present feel the strength of their bond. Feel the approval of the moon goddess, feel the rightness of this unprecedented pairing. When the light faded, Isla and Aldric stood hand in hand facing their kingdom. Not as king and servant, not as ruler and subject, but as partners, equals, two halves of a whole that had finally found each other after years of searching. The court erupted in cheers that shook the very foundations of Silverpeak Castle. "We did it," Isla thought, overwhelmed with emotion. "You did it," Aldric corrected. "You took the position no one wanted you to have and made it yours. Made them see what I saw from the moment our eyes met, that you're extraordinary. I'm just me. Exactly. Just you. The silent Omega who became a queen, the mute girl who found her voice, the forgotten servant who changed a kingdom." Aldric squeezed her hand. "You're going to be an amazing queen, Isla, and I'm honored to rule beside you." 5 years later. Isla stood on the balcony of Silverpeak Castle, watching the sun set over the mountains she now called home. Behind her, in the royal chambers, she could hear Aldric playing with their twins, a boy and a girl, both carrying the White Lycan traits, both perfectly healthy, both living proof that the bloodline would continue. "Come back inside," Aldric's voice echoed in her mind. "They're asking for you, something about a story before bed." Isla smiled. "I'll be right there." She lingered a moment longer, thinking about everything that had changed in 5 years. The policies she'd implemented protecting vulnerable wolves, the schools she'd opened teaching communication through means other than speech, the alliances she'd forged with neighboring territories who now saw the White Lycan Queen as a symbol of strength rather than weakness. And she thought about that day in the Grand Hall, when she'd been invisible in the corner, carrying Lady Morgana's bags, convinced she would always be nothing. The moon goddess had other plans. "Isla," Aldric called again, this time with his actual voice. "The children are getting impatient." "Coming," Isla said aloud, because that was the other thing that had changed. About 2 years into their marriage, as the White Lycan magic fully integrated into her system, her voice had started returning. Not fully. She could only speak a few words at a time, and it required concentration. But it was there, a gift from the magic that had transformed her life. She returned inside to find Aldric on the floor, their children climbing all over him like he was a piece of furniture. He looked utterly content. The lonely, isolated king had become a husband and father who smiled more than he frowned. "Mama," their daughter Lyanna called out, "tell us the story, the one about the silent Omega and the king." "Please," their son, Eric, added. Isla settled beside them, pulling both children into her lap. Through their bond, Aldric helped her form the words, lending her strength as he always did. "Once upon a time," Isla began slowly, her voice soft but clear, "there was a king who was very lonely, and a girl who thought she was invisible." The children settled in, their eyes wide. They'd heard this story 100 times, but they never tired of it. The king searched everywhere for someone who understood him, Isla continued. And the girl hid in shadows, thinking no one would ever see her. But the moon goddess had a plan. "She brought them together," Lyanna exclaimed. "She did," Isla confirmed, smiling. At a ceremony where 1,000 women competed for the king's attention, but he walked past all of them. To the silent Omega in the shadows, Eric finished triumphantly. Aldric laughed, pulling all three of them into his arms. And do you know what the king said when he finally found her? What? Both children asked in unison, even though they knew. He said, "You're mine, and I've been waiting my whole life to find you." Aldric looked at Isla with such love it still made her breath catch after 5 years. And the silent Omega didn't need words to answer because the mate bond spoke for her, said everything that needed to be said. And they lived happily ever after, Lyanna declared. They did, Isla agreed softly. Not because everything was perfect, not because there were no challenges, but because they faced everything together. And that made all the difference. She tucked both children into the massive bed. They still insisted on sleeping with their parents most nights, and Aldric was too soft to say no. Within minutes, they were asleep, tiny faces peaceful in the firelight. They're beautiful, Isla thought to Aldric, just like you. They have your eyes, Aldric responded, glacial blue, the mark of the bloodline, the mark of their mother's strength. They stood together, watching their children sleep, the children that shouldn't have been possible. The continuation of a bloodline everyone thought would end, the proof that the moon goddess's plans were always bigger than anyone imagined. Do you ever regret it? Aldric asked quietly. Taking on this role, this life, being thrust from invisibility into the center of everything? Never, Isla responded immediately. You gave me a voice, Aldric, not just through the bond, but by seeing me when no one else did, by treating my silence as strength instead of weakness, by making me believe I was worth something. You were always worth something, Aldric corrected. I just made sure the world knew it. Isla turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd changed everything. Thank you. For walking past 1,000 women to the one hiding in the shadows, for seeing what no one else saw, for loving me when I couldn't even speak. Thank you for being brave enough to accept the bond, Aldric replied, for not running when every instinct probably told you to, for standing beside me even when the entire court tried to tear you down, for being the partner I needed, even when you didn't think you were ready. They kissed, the mate bond singing between them, as strong now as it had been that first moment their eyes met in the grand hall. And in that moment, Isla understood the truth she'd learned over 5 years of ruling beside the White Lycan King. Strength didn't come from being the loudest voice in the room. It came from knowing your worth even when no one else saw it. It came from standing firm in the face of opposition. It came from finding someone who saw your silence not as emptiness, but as power waiting to be recognized. 1,000 women had competed for the White Lycan King, but he'd chosen the one who didn't compete, didn't fight for attention, didn't try to prove her worth through grand gestures or impressive speeches. He'd chosen the silent Omega who understood loneliness, who saw him as more than a crown and a title, who needed him just as much as he needed her. And together, they'd built something extraordinary, a kingdom that valued all its wolves, not just the loudest. A reign based on partnership and equality. A love story that would be told for generations, about the king who walked past 1,000 noblewomen to the silent Omega in the shadows, and the Omega who found her voice through the mate bond that changed everything. Years later, when young Omegas who felt invisible asked Elder Helena about Queen Isla, she would smile and say, "The queen was just like you, silent, overlooked, dismissed as nothing. But she had something the loudest wolves lacked, the patience to listen, the strength to endure, and the courage to accept love when it found her." And then she'd add, "Never mistake silence for weakness." Queen Isla taught us that sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones that speak without sound, the ones that change hearts instead of arguing with minds, the ones that prove worth through action, not words. The children would look up at the portrait in the great hall, King Aldric and Queen Isla standing side by side, their glacial blue eyes staring out with confidence and love, and they'd understand that being different wasn't a curse. It was a gift, just like the moon goddess intended. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that being overlooked doesn't mean being worthless, subscribe to Alpha Moon Tales, because every story here celebrates those who are dismissed, ignored, or underestimated until they prove everyone wrong. Your moment is coming. Your voice matters, even in silence. Subscribe and be part of our pack, where every wolf is seen, heard, and valued. Thank you for being here, beautiful family. Until next time, remember, sometimes the greatest love stories are written in silence, and the most powerful queens are the ones no one saw coming.